Chapter 4, Faelen. As the party traversed the wild in search of the fairy city, Kala whispered over Beliath's shoulder. Psst, hey. Beliath swatted a few more vines in his path before turning around to find Kala with a vexing smile on her face. What is it? Have you ever met a fairy? No, I mostly grew up with animals. Right, well, fairies are so fun and cute, especially the elders with their little wings. I can't wait. Beliath offered a quaint smile before returning to the pesky vines. Honestly, everything outside of the moon forest is exciting to me, and a little overwhelming at times. Alaketh suddenly appeared beside them like a shadow and whispered, How many times must I warn you two to be quiet? We are approaching fairy territory, and I'd very much like to avoid their blasted riddle maker. Bestie nudged Alaketh playfully. Oh, come now, lad. Been on the road 3 days now. Can't you let the young ones have a moment of wonder? Alaketh was tired of travels. He took note of the noisy baubles shaking around in Bestie's pack. Something in the pack started banging against Bestie's lute. It caused an accidental strum of the strings over and over. Bestie didn't seem to notice, or perhaps care. Alaketh's eye began to twitch as he wondered why he never gave protest to bringing this dwarf along in the first place. Bestie then tripped on a branch and stumbled into Alaketh, knocking him over entirely. Oops, watch your step there. Alaketh was too shocked to say a single word in return. Bestie helped Alaketh to his feet before prattling on. Anyways, I've been meaning to ask. It's not every day you see an elfin mainland. How did you and the girl make it out of Velenara? Did you get some kind of special permission from the High Council? Alaketh, wiping mud from his turning red face, replied, Not exactly. I performed a very risky spell to travel here. Without traveling, let's just say. Oh, I know all about risky travel, believe you me. I once almost accepted an invitation into a stranger's carriage with no knowledge of their destination. Next day, I find out I narrowly escaped a long night with a couple of vampires. Who knows, could have been fun. Maybe I'd have become immortal like yourself. Alaketh sighed and said, Yes, sounds completely similar. Meanwhile, Beliath leaned closer to Kala with curiosity. Why do the fairies have a riddle maker? He's kind of like your owl friend here. Gora from atop Bestie's shoulders scoffed. Highly unlikely. Kala continued. He can twist the trees and paths to confuse trespassers. Gora, in utter shock, replied, You knew about that? I thought my abilities within the moon forest were a well-kept secret. Kala shrugged. Well, let's just say after seeing a few dreamers wander the moon forest in circles only to come out muttering nonsense, we assumed a better strategy might be to just, use our words. Suddenly, a high-pitched voice interrupted from the trees above. My, oh my, what do we have here? Another group of lost souls seeking the wisdom of the ever-brilliant fairies. Now look what you've done, Alaketh mourned. Beliath was more excited than ever. A little old man with white hair and pittering wings on his back descended from the trees above. He hovered pompously above the party. One hand twiddled a long-groomed, snowy mustache, while the other was neatly fastened on the lapel of a fancy leather jerkin. Oh, Alaketh the High and Mighty, all the way from the Western Isles, the shrill voice continued. What brings you to our humble abode? Alaketh did not have the patience to be diplomatic, although he did manage to hold back some harsher words behind his clenched teeth. Belzemir, just let us through. I have treated with your king on multiple occasions. Oh, Alaketh, always so serious. Don't fret, I have just the riddle to lighten your mood. Confounded trickster, Alaketh shouted. Before Alaketh could object any further, Belzemir chuckled and then vanished in a blink. He left behind purple shimmering remnants of magic in the air. Suddenly, the trees ahead of the party began to twist and bend, forming living archways that held an air of invitation. Kala's eyes sparkled with excitement. Told you they were fun. What happens now? Beliath asked. We play along, come on. Alaketh dragged himself behind the party through the archways. The trees guided them to a serene clearing where a raised pedestal with an inscription stood in front of 5 shimmering mirrors. The mirrors were made of nothing more than tangled vines and pools of reflective water hovering inside of them. Kala ushered Beliath towards the central pedestal. Beliath went ahead and read the inscription out loud. "Show true spirit, and you'll be one step closer to our delightful abode. You wouldn't dare drag the cold in when entering a warm home." With a beard-scratching finger, Bestie let out an investigative groan and began examining the mirrors. Kala excitedly pulled Beliath to stand in front of the central mirror with her. It was the first time Beliath had seen a clear reflection of himself outside the dampened light of the moon forest. Dark hair, unruly and long, framed his green eyes to appear smaller than he remembered. Next, he noticed the tiny scratches along his face. But then, a new detail stole his attention. A terrifying one. A simmering gold swirled around his pupils, and then it beckoned him closer, to listen, to embrace it. He began inching closer and closer to the mirror. Kala accidentally bumped into Beliath's shoulder, interrupting his trance-like state. "You okay there? Come on, let's solve this thing." Beliath shook it off and said, "Yeah." Gora flew up and then perched himself on Beliath's shoulder to get a glance in one of the mirrors. The massive owl's wings spread across Beliath's shoulders. "I am magnificent." Bestie and Alaketh followed suit and took their positions in front of the last two mirrors on opposite sides. Alaketh groaned. "All right, everyone. Look into a mirror and smile." "Are you sure you can manage that?" Bestie joked. Alaketh replied with a sarcastic, "Ha, ha." Each member of the party lined up and smiled in front of their respective mirrors. All were happy to do so, except for Alaketh, of course, who donned a sarcastic grin while silently muttering to himself. After a few awkward face changes from Alaketh, nothing seemed to happen. Alaketh whispered to himself, "Damn it, Belzamir." Kala noticed Alaketh struggling. "I think you need to show true spirit. You must give a proper smile, Alaketh." Alaketh drew in a deep breath. He decided to think upon his past. His family's home in Velenara, the elven capital, in the Western Isles. He pictured his mother preparing his favorite breakfast, seaweed pancakes and berries with cream. His view from his bedroom window, where he could see the white and blue stones of Velenara's grand citadel. None of the views he had seen from greater heights ever seemed to compare. He also pictured the future, when the war between dreamers and dawnkeepers would finally be over. A future where he could finally return to his magic scrolls and artifact research, nestled in the comfort of knowing Mainland was finally safe, and that none of its threats would be ever great enough to reach the elves. He mustered a tiny hope and brought it to the forefront of his face. A smile broke through. The water in the mirror seemed to respond. In fact, it rippled with excitement. The tangled vines absorbed all of the water and then sunk into the ground to rejoin their fellow roots. Beliath watched in awe as the other mirrors followed suit and plopped right into the dirt. "I guess it was just Alaketh that needed to smile," Kala blurted. "Belzamir," Alaketh muttered again. The trees ahead of the party bent and merged to form a new set of archways that led deeper into the forest. As the party shuffled through, their ears began to perk up to whimsical noises of chimes and laughter. The air shifted and filled their senses with sweet scents. The trees overhead continued merging to the point that they could no longer see the sky through the cracks above. This living tunnel became darker and darker as the gaps in the arches tightened their path. Beliath clutched Kala's hand. "Don't worry, this is all part of it," she assured him. The dark tunnel eventually led to a quaint wooden door, painted blue. "Let's get on with it," Alaketh said. "Let Beliath do the honor," Kala exclaimed. Beliath fumbled through the darkness until he grasped a small knob and turned. As the hinges squealed, light and sound rushed in to reveal a bustling city of fairy folk beyond the door. Grumbling men with colorful wings pushed carts of grain across cobblestone streets, hollering to each other as they passed. A group of fairy women rushed past as well, clutching leather bags with glowing scrolls. Their fancy robes were adorned with iron insignias, as if they all belonged to the same organization, or school perhaps. The buildings appeared as very tall cottages, covered from head to toe in nature. Beautiful dresses of flowery vines hung over the sides. "Everything looks so naturey," said Bestie, scratching his beard. "And yet it all feels so official." Kala tugged on Beliath's arm. "This way! They have pastries shaped like fairy wings!" she shrieked, her voice barely audible over the shrieking. "Don't go too far," Alaketh bellowed, his voice lost in the bustle. The pair had already disappeared into a line of hungry fairies. Bestie gave Alaketh a pat on the back as if to say, "Good attempt," before waltzing across the street to join the amusement. Gora flew atop Bestie's shoulders, his eyes glowing with anticipation. Bestie looked up at Gora atop his shoulders, and Gora stared back. Bestie said, This feels, Gora simply stared back and nodded in response. Meanwhile, Alaketh sighed heavily and thought to himself, "Forget it, they're safe." He scampered off on his own with a look of determination. Kala emerged triumphant, a pastry clutched in each hand. The pastries glowed faintly, and the scent of cinnamon and honey wafted through the air. She pulled Beliath along to see what entertainment awaited them next in the city square. They arrived at the center of the square, where a large, glorious fountain stood. The water sparkled with an unnatural luminescence. Stone statues of wise elder fairies posed as if they were in a delightful conversation. Fairy children laughed as they skipped, hand in hand, around the fountain. Occasionally, the children would pause and whisper secrets into the fountain. "What are those children doing?" Beliath asked. "Sending good wishes to human children on the other side," Kala replied. "The other side?" "Yes, to our realm. We crossed over to the fairy realm when we entered that little door." One of the children approached Beliath and asked, "Hey, mister, wanna come play with us?" Beliath froze. The child's innocence suddenly struck Beliath's heart with a sharp reminder. This journey had been so treacherous until now, and this child had suddenly reminded him that the world is not entirely cruel, and that there's more to it than struggling against humanity, that there are things worth protecting. Beliath shook himself out of these thoughts, only to realize he had taken too long to answer. The children sauntered off and started skipping around the fountain again. Kala noticed a drop of sweat forming above Beliath's brow. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I just felt so protected in the moon forest for so long. And now it's been only a few days and I'm already being chased after again. I don't know that anywhere is safe for me, and I'm not sure anyone around me is going to be safe either." Kala gently rested a hand on Beliath's shoulder. Her eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, spoke a quiet understanding. He continued searching her face for any signs that she might provide some insight on a separate topic in return. "What brought you to journey with Alaketh?" he asked. Kala's gaze fell to the cobblestones at their feet. With a heavy sigh, she said, "It's rare that elves die. Velenara has very few problems at all, and when we do, they usually come from the outside world. My father went out for a drink one night. Someone in the tavern whispered to him of great promise in mainland, so he decided to sail there, and he eventually returned with wonderful stories. And so he decided to go again, only this time he brought my mother. They promised to come back in 3 days and bring me next. They never returned. A search party was sent only to return with unfortunate news. So I needed a purpose, and that's when Alaketh found me. He had been looking for an apprentice. He took me in and showed me how to channel magic from our god, and how to use it for good. And then one day he said he'd achieved as much as he could in Velenara, that it was time to venture out. Not many elves get to leave. I suppose that's my father's blood. And Alaketh is very powerful, so I wasn't worried about our safety. But anyways, do you know who is even more powerful than him?" Beliath waited for Kala to give an answer. "Me," she shouted before giving Beliath a friendly poke and racing around the fountain. Beliath chased her clumsily, nearly knocking over the fairy child that had questioned him earlier. Laughter filled the square as they stole a rare moment of joy from the looming threats outside. Meanwhile, Bestie sat on a bench nearby, munching on a wing-shaped pastry, while Gora was still perched on his shoulders. You know, you don't have to stay on my shoulders. I'm aware. So, I guess you like it there? What if I do? Bestie paused for a moment and then accepted his new friend pet. He proceeded to feed the rest of his pastry to Gora, who munched happily. Gora shook off the crumbs from his feathers and asked, "Why are you still with us when we face great danger ahead?" Bestie looked at the remaining few crumbs in his hand. There's only so much good in this world, and it's only becoming harder to find with all the war. I feel there's something good in the young lad, something worth protecting. Bestie dropped the crumbs to the floor. I guess I don't completely know, but I know that much. Alaketh suddenly reappeared, but not alone. Beside him was an older fairy woman with royal flair and a long golden chain attached to a pocket watch fastened against her dress. Beliath and Kala were delighted by the colorful threads of the lady's dress and how they matched her shimmering wings. Alaketh quietly whispered to the fairy woman. A warm smile formed on the woman's lips before she called out, "Beliath, come here, child. I have a mind to meet you." Beliath shuffled closer shyly. "Do you know who I am?" the woman inquired. Beliath shook his head. "I am Lady Ophelia, one of the regents of our great capital, Faelen. Alaketh brought you here for sanctuary, but that is merely the first reason." Beliath could feel a strange, familiar sensation in his eye beginning to intensify. "In Faelen, I possess a certain knack, a talent for sensing and drawing out magic. Do not be alarmed. Alaketh has merely asked me to focus on the sensing part today to see how close you are to blossoming." Beliath replied, "You mean how much longer until I become like my father?" "Precisely." Beliath swallowed the fear around his next question. "Could you tell me who my father is?" Ophelia's expression turned grim for a moment. "I only know rumors, dear boy. And even if those rumors were confirmed, I fear it is not my place." Beliath's shoulders eased with a mix of disappointment and relief. "Now then, let's have a look at you, shall we?" Beliath nodded, warmed by Ophelia's comforting voice. Ophelia placed a hand on Beliath's forehead, her eyes fluttering shut. For a tense moment, her brow furrowed, and a hint of pain ran across her face. Then, with a gasp, she snatched her hand away. "Astonishing. You truly are one of a kind." "What did you see?" "In a word, everything. And you're on the brink of unlocking it all. It is clear now what path I must take. I will offer protection and guidance to make sure you can journey safely to Senegoth to find your mother. I do hope you will come back and visit when all is said and done. Please, enjoy your time here before you go, and let me know if there's anything I can do to make your stay more palatable." Beliath hesitated before revealing a hopeful grin. "There is one thing." "What, dear?" "Can you give us more of those wing pastries for my friend Kala, and a few for my owl?" A rich laugh escaped Lady Ophelia's lips. "Of course, child. You can have anything your heart's desire." She winked at Beliath before gliding back to Alaketh, a hushed conversation resuming between them. Ophelia called out, One more thing. Beliath and Bestie, I'd like you both to stand next to each other." Bestie moseyed over to stand beside Beliath, while Gora held his stance atop Bestie's shoulders with pride. "Now then, good Bestie," Lady Ophelia continued, her voice taking on a theatrical air, "present your lute, and Beliath, I trust you won't mind a touch of borrowing." Beliath nodded. Ophelia extended her delicate hands, placing one on Bestie's lute, and then the other on Beliath's chest. Her eyes shut, and a golden spark of energy suddenly emerged from Beliath's chest. It traveled across her hand, illuminating her wrinkles. The golden spark continued up through her arm and then across her chest, where it seemed to transform into a vibrant mixture of purple and gold energy. It then continued toward its final destination, Bestie's lute. The instrument erupted in a dazzling display of light. The wood pulsed with a mystical glow, casting a reflection of golden and purple light on Bestie's surprised face. "What just happened?" Ophelia, with a twinkle in her eyes, offered a regal bow. A mere transfer of power, my dear. I borrowed a spark from Beliath, infused it with a touch of my own, and voila! A magical lute to aid you on your journey. Before Bestie could thank her and ask a question or two about what one does with a magical lute, a concerned fairy, fully clad in armor, descended from the sky. My lady, we have an unexpected visitor. It's Sidamar. Ophelia's expression turned grim again. Don't let him in, Alaketh warned. The Dawnkeepers mustn't be alerted to Beliath's identity. Ophelia brushed past Alaketh. He may be their leader, but he's one man. After a moment, she paused to reconsider the concern spreading across Alaketh's face. She directed one additional command to the fairy guard. Assemble the army just in case. The fairy guard bowed with determination and then took off into the sky. Alaketh hurried to the party and warned, We must prepare to depart. A heavy silence settled between Beliath and Kala. Their eyes met with a flash of longing. A longing to stay. Faelen had offered a fleeting haven and a moment to forget. Yet a familiar ache grew in Beliath's chest, a constant reminder of the war that raged outside. The joyous hum of Faelen's streets abruptly transformed into a frantic chorus of clanging shutters and panicked shouts. Alarm bells rang. Carts were abandoned. The commotion wasn't confined to the ground. The sky began to fill with a swarm of fairies overhead. Their wings shone in every hue of the rainbow. Their armor glimmered with protective spells. Banners of silk displaying the crests of various noble houses waved proudly in the air. The fairies readied themselves for a total defense of the city. Ophelia twirled her fingers and a quaint door flickered into existence directly in front of her. A tall man emerged, and the door closed behind him. A long, stark beard framed a determined face. A silky white robe flowed across thick iron armor. He carried a priestly seriousness. He held an ornate, gilded staff, while a sword remained sheathed at his side. His deep voice emanated with an immovable confidence. I am here to talk. Then talk, Ophelia stammered. Hand over the boy, and your world will remain unscathed by her holy light. This is Faelen. We don't care about your threats or your goddess. If that's all you came to say, I'm afraid your journey was for naught. Leave now. A tension hung in the air like a guillotine. Sidamar closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they glowed with an unnatural light. So be it. The radiant light in his eyes began emanating from his staff as well. Ophelia's eyes widened as a horrifying realization came across her senses. This is no ordinary messenger. He's a conduit. He's about to channel the full wrath of his goddess. Alaketh roared, Give us a door, now, Ophelia! Fear threatened to paralyze Ophelia, but Alaketh's urgent grip on her arm jolted her back to reality. Ophelia, now! With her eyes stuck on the terrifying sight of Sidamar, words managed to escape through the side of her mouth. There's a door waiting for you all near the fountain. Hurry, you don't have long. May your god protect you. Alaketh grabbed Beliath and the others, propelling them towards the fountain in the town square. Before entering the open door, everyone in the party took one last look to see something none of them had seen before. A divine being descending from the clouds. Giant wings sent intense winds through the city streets as an ethereal fairy woman whose great size dwarfed the surrounding buildings hovered above the army. She brought with her a protective purple light that began to coalesce and descend upon the army. Across the square, Sidamar crossed his staff with his sword. The point of convergence between them glowed white-hot. Then he unleashed a torrent of raw energy. A massive beam of pure sunlight ripped through the air. The ground began to quake as the beam struck the protective dome of light surrounding the army, creating a blinding light. With their world shaking, the party was quickly reminded of the task at hand: survival. They surged towards the door, escaping a blazing heat behind them. Before the frightening scene could catch up with them, they made it through. The door quickly closed, and they found themselves in darkness once again.